Yo, thanks for tuning in to the Viewturistic YouTube channel, where honestly, all we really want to do is bring awareness to the personal development journeys of single dads all across the world. I originally started this, well, me and my brother originally started this channel about 5 years ago, back in 2015, and it was kind of in response to my recent divorce at the time, and me just wanting to express my thoughts and ideas on what it meant to me to be a single dad and the different challenges that I faced, how I was feeling at the time, and my projection for moving forward and growing into the best version of myself, as not only as a dad but as a person too. And so in those last 5 years, I've obviously learned a lot. A lot has changed. One of our videos on this channel, it's at about 20,000 views right now. So that's not astronomical, but that's definitely something worth celebrating, to know that there's 20,000 people out there who saw our video, and a lot of people actually responded to my thoughts and opinions on how I felt about dating at the time of being a single dad. So I say all that to say that if you are a former subscriber, if you subscribed to us way back in the day when we first started this, thanks for still being here. I look forward to sharing more newer content with y'all, and a more evolved thought process in regards to how I feel about being a single dad now. And then for those of you who are new to the channel and might not have never seen a Viewturistic video before, just know that in this space, I don't talk from a top-down approach as if I know it all. I talk from a very in the moment, this is what I'm experiencing angle, with the hopes that maybe you might be going through something similar right now, or somebody else that's going through something similar, and maybe something that I said might shed some new light on something that you're going through. So with all that out the way, I really wanted to start this channel back up by giving a top 10 list of what I feel are like the top 10 rules when it comes to being a single dad, or the 10 commandments, if you will. So without further ado, and yeah, I'm actually gonna read off my notebook this time, because it's been a while. So I gotta sharpen up those improv skills in front of the camera, but I really want to get this information out. So excuse me as I do look down in my notebook to check my notes and reference what I'm gonna be saying. So single dad, 10 commandments. I'm gonna start with number 10. Trust your instincts. So I know we hear a lot that mom knows best, or mothers know best, but I do want to emphasize that dads know best too, maybe in a different way, but dads know best too. And so it's really important in many situations, I'll say many, if not all situations, as a dad, when it comes to making certain decisions or choices that is gonna affect the well-being of your kid or your kids, make sure you trust your instinct. That 9 times out of 10, your instinct ain't lying. Sometimes it's gonna feel like, and before I go on, I'm gonna do separate videos on each of these 10 commandments too, where I'll expand on it. And right now, I'm kind of just giving a brief summary of where my thoughts were when I put these initial 10 commandments down. But so be looking forward to additional videos in the future of me expanding on these 10 different rules or 10 different commandments that I'm sharing with you right now. But back to number 10, trusting your instincts. Trust yourself and know that we have internal radars as well that help guide us, and allow us to know best as well, just like moms know best for certain things. Number 9, build your emotional intelligence. Avoid making decisions where your kid or your co-parent is involved. Go out your way to build your emotional intelligence to the point where you no longer making decisions as knee-jerk reactions based off of pure emotion. As many of us know, that could cause a lot of problems because when you are making decisions or acting from emotion and avoiding logic, a lot of times our emotions will take us to places that might not be the best or the most efficient way to go about solving the problem. And in retrospect, if you look at those times when you did make decisions based off pure emotion, you'll probably more oftentimes than not realize that you could have had a much better outcome had you just subtracted your emotions from the situation as much as possible. And I say as much as possible because I know it's not possible to completely remove your emotions from a choice, but or from a decision. But if you do it as much as you can, I'm pretty sure you'll learn based on the pattern of other decisions that you've had to make in the past. The ones where you used more logic or even a balance between logic and emotion and not just pure emotion, those decisions probably turned out better for you. Number 8, don't bash your co-parent. I know that's easier said than done sometimes, but at the end of the day, your kids are watching you when you do this. And kind of talking about your co-parent in a negative light, that's not going to do anything but confuse the kid even more. Maybe force them to feel like they got to pick sides. They might start acting out or projecting on the co-parent what they learn from you, and that's obviously not a good thing because the kids should have a respectable and healthy relationship with the mom and the dad. So I feel like it should go without saying, but I've been there before. Ain't none of us perfect, and I know how it can be. If I'm referring back to number 9 in regards to the emotions, sometimes we make decisions and do things out of pure emotion, and that can cause us to bash our co-parent. But I want to make sure that anything that I do now, especially if my son is around, I'm not going to talk about his mom in a negative light. That's just something that I've grown to understand the importance of not doing that, and I've also seen the detrimental effects of doing that. And so I highly advise against bashing your co-parent. Number 7, practice discernment with advice from others. I know in the last one I just gave some advice, but this is in a different context. And what I mean by practicing discernment with taking advice from other people is understanding that all of our situations are different. No two co-parenting situations are identical. So if you're reaching out for advice from someone who might be able to relate to what you're going through, or knows someone else who is in a similar situation, sometimes the advice that they give will be it'll be tainted with the biased views of how they see their own situation, which that might not be effective for you, or vice versa. Like you might be going through something that they've never seen and never experienced or witnessed, and when they try to give you advice, if you just blindly utilize that advice, it might blow up in your face and not, it might make excuse me, it might make the situation even worse. So you really got to learn how to practice discernment when getting advice from other people on how to co-parent or different things that come about in your life as a single dad. You don't just want to take advice blindly just because it feels good to hear somebody else, kind of coaching you through your situation. you got to make sure that it's applicable for your own unique situation too, before you just blindly take somebody else's advice. Number 6, befriend the co-parent if and when possible. Now, for me, this is something that wasn't always possible because I think tensions were built up to such a high level on both sides, my side and my son's mom's side. For a couple years, it wasn't even possible for us to be friends. And that's just the reality of our situation. And when we weren't necessarily friends, we still found a way to be cordial with each other and coexist as co-parents in our son's life. But I've noticed a significant increase in the well-being of our son since my son's mom and I actually started to build a friendship around raising our son. At the end of the day, it just makes it that much sweeter, that much better, I think, for our son when he's able to see his mom and his dad not just getting along in this like weird, estranged way, but actually getting along as friends, with the common goal being to make sure that our son has the best life possible. So if and when possible, definitely consider befriending, the mother or the co-parent of your kid or your kids. It's only going to help them in the long run. Number 5, be flexible. This one's kind of self-explanatory. The journey for me, being a single dad, it's been a journey, constantly evolving journey. Some things don't look the way now that they once did, and some things that I projected would look a certain way didn't turn out to be that way. And so I had to learn to not get so rooted in the idea of what I hoped things would be, and kind of learn how to be flexible in the process and adapt to the current circumstances as much as possible, and not being so focused on what I wish that it was or what I hope that it could be, because those wishes and hopes hanging on to those wishes and hopes might not be ideal in whatever my current realities are, or the current reality of my circumstances are. So I had to be flexible. And flexibility, once again, it's only going to help the situation. It's going to make it a lot less stressful for you as the single dad in the situation if you learn how to be flexible. It's not always going to go the way that you imagined or the way that you planned, but that don't mean that it still can't go good. So being flexible, learning how to adapt, it'll serve you well, I promise. Number 4, this one is super important. This one, just me being a naturally hard-headed person, this one took me a while to really grasp, but pick your battles. Like, you really gotta learn when to turn your ego down in certain situations and understand that you can't win all the situations. At the beginning of my journey as a single dad, I felt like I needed control over a lot of things because, in the beginning, when you co-parenting with somebody, y'all learning how to function in 2 separate units as opposed to 1 unit. Or in my situation, I was married to my son's mom, so there was one point in time where the way that we did things was housed in 1 unit. And so when we branched off into 2 units, of course, each side is give and take, or there has to be give and take in order for it to work. But in that process of give and take, you're going to get frustrated a lot of times when something ain't necessarily going the way that you want it to go. And then in that moment, you do have to set your ego aside as much as possible and ask yourself, is your kid's life or well-being in jeopardy or in danger by either going with or not going with what the mother of your child or what the co-parent of your child is suggesting? And so in those instances where, you know, she might be wanting to do something a certain way and I might see it a different way, sometimes you do have to just like pick your battle and ask yourself, is it really worth fighting over this and like creating this long, drawn out, tense situation over, pride at the end of the day? Or is it something that you could kind of like let slide, like, whatever, like that's not necessarily how I would do it, but it's not hurting my son, so whatever the hell, like you can have it your way. You really got to pick your battles, because if you try to fight all the battles to have that, to make it go the way that just you want it to go, I promise you in for a long ass ride and a whole bunch of headaches. So I really learned how to start picking my battles and not going so hard or being so intense about just having it my way. And I think that that's probably a common thing amongst all co-parents, people who have to share parenting responsibilities. Sometimes you're going to bump heads and clash, and especially as two parents who aren't together, I think it's super important to get to that point. And I can only speak as a single dad, but it's super important. It has been super important for me to get to that point where I could just pick my battles and not just be ready for war every single time something isn't in alignment with my philosophy on raising our kid. It's just, you learn. It's something that it's a skill that you gotta learn over time. Number 3, remind your kids that you love them, and often. And I'm not just talking about reminding them by saying that you love them. Of course, that's super important too, but from my experience, especially the way that, our situation played out, there was a lot of time where, my son would be with his mom for 2 weeks at a time and be with me for 2 weeks at a time. And in that elapsed time, during the 2 weeks that we aren't together, that me and my son aren't together, I think it was in those moments where it was even more important to let him know that wherever I was in the world, wherever he was in the world, that I'm crazy about him and that I love him, and just because we aren't sharing the same physical space in this very moment, that doesn't change one bit the amount of love, that I have for my son. And by telling him that, by showing him that, by, making sure that he feels like, he is my priority in all situations, I think I was able to communicate the level of love that I have for my son and get him to understand that no matter what the circumstances are outside of me and his bond and relationship, that I'm going to be there for him no matter what, no matter where, no matter when. And my love for him is like exponentially strong no matter what. So super important to, especially as a single dad, to constantly remind your kids by showing them and telling them just how much you love them. Number 2, this one is another one that I struggled with a lot, but I'm getting better at it. It's still a working process for me. But number 2, what I put is to not lose your true self in the process of all of this. It's super easy to get consumed and caught up in playing your role as a dad and making that be like the filter of your identity, meaning that every single thing that you do is looked at through the lens of being a dad. And while that's cool, and like I said, I still struggle with that balance sometimes. While that's cool and all, that can cause some severe internal turmoil with yourself in regards to self-confidence, self-esteem, just fulfillment in life, anything that you could think of related to your well-being or to who you are as an individual and your identity, when you lose yourself in the process of being a dad, it's almost impossible to be the best. I know it sounds like an oxymoron in a way. It sounds kind of counterproductive, but the more that you lose touch with your true self, the harder it is for you to be the best dad possible for your kids. So a better way to say it is, the more that you try to just be nothing but super dad, nothing but living out the identity of a dad, the harder it is to be a good, robust, enjoyable dad, because you stripped your own personality and stripped so much of yourself in that process that your kid is kind of left with a shell of your former self. Yeah, of course, you provided all the needs that your kid needs, giving them, an abundance of time and things like that. But you, as an individual, you yourself, it's really hard to put your best foot forward and be your true, authentic self when so much of your identity is wrapped up in being a dad. So this is definitely one of those ones where it's way harder to say than actually do. But I found just how important it is to strike that balance, because there was a time when I've lived on both. I can't say I've lived on both ends of the spectrum, because there's never been a point where I was just full blown me and forgetting about my responsibilities as a dad. But there has been a time where I was on this extremely on this side of the spectrum, to where I was full blown dad and had neglected who I was as a person and as an individual. And that kind of leaves you feeling empty at the end of the day, especially if you have an arrangement where your kid ain't with you all the time, because you wrap yourself up so much in the energy of just being dad. That's fine when the kid is around, but what happens when your kid is at school, or when it's time for them to go to their mama house, or they spend the night at a friend's house, or they just get older and they don't even need you to be around that much anymore? You'll find that you kind of you're left feeling kind of empty when they're not around. And so that's where the importance of making sure that you don't lose your true self in the process comes into play, because that helps you to be able to still live a fulfilled life in alignment with what you are passionate about in life outside of being a dad. So, like I said, way easier said than done, but that is definitely one of the most important things that I've learned in my journey of being a single dad, is to not neglect who I truly am on the inside. So, my son is only going to benefit from that in the long run, because he's going to learn who his dad really is. And number one, this one is by far what I feel the most important, and that's to always show up and never back down. So no matter how uphill the battle might seem, no matter how many times you feel like you were unjustly served in the family court system, no matter how many times word has gotten back to you that the mother of your child is talking crazy about you, or whatever, anything that you could think that could go wrong, or anything that you could think that might serve as an attack on you as a dad, do not let that shit ever make you back down or get to the place where you're not showing up for your kid. Even if it's showing up in an emotional way. Some people have situations where they're not allowed to physically be around their kids, but they're allowed to have some type of contact with them. Whatever your unique circumstance might be, even if you are in a situation right now where you're not allowed to talk to your kids, spend time with your kid, whatever, I'm pretty sure that there's still something that could be done for you to change that, for you to be to show up for your kid. And if that's your circumstance, then that applies to you too. Like, never back down. Always show up, because they're gonna remember that shit when they grow up. And know your rights. Like, if you are currently fighting a custody case, make sure you're familiar with the rights that you already have as a dad in your in whatever state that you're living in. And finally, related to the always show up for your kid and never back down, this is kind of related to that video that I mentioned earlier that ended up getting about 20,000 views so far. But never put a romantic relationship above the relationship that you have with your kids or kid. I don't care how you want to skin that or dice that up, but I'm standing on that. That is probably that's one of the strongest pieces of advice that I could give from my own personal circumstance and from the many other examples of single dads that I know out there who have been in situations where they did choose to, put a romantic relationship over their kids' relationship. And then when that romantic relationship didn't pan out, it ended up being some of the most miserable days of their lives, because in retrospect they realized what a huge mistake it was to put a woman over the relationship that they have with their kids. And personally, I feel like that's never a good look. So just whatever you have to do to avoid putting especially a romantic relationship above the relationship with your kids, avoid it at all costs. And that goes for other relationships too, whether it's with your mama, your daddy, brother, sister, whatever. That relationship, especially in the early phases of your kid's life, is so important for that relationship to be number one, in my opinion. So yeah, I'm gonna leave it at that. Like I said, we got 10 different commandments or rules to talk about in more detail in other videos, but that was my 10 single dad commandments. And so if you were around for the earlier videos, you'll know that I leave my phone number in the comment section or in the description box. I'm also going to put it on the screen because I want y'all to reach out. Over the past 5 years or so, I've had probably about 70 different people from 70 different cities just reaching out to me, just chopping it up through text message. And I've helped some of those people through some of their darkest times, and through some of their darkest times related to being a single dad. And so if you're in one of those situations, if you want to just reach out, if you want to suggest something for me to talk about in regards to this whole single dad journey or personal development as a single dad journey, please feel free to do so. My phone number is 414-292-7258. Once again, I'm going to put it in the description box. I'm also going to put it on the screen. And so until next time, make sure y'all keep showing up for them kids. Make sure you're showing up for your kids. And show up for me next time when I'm on your screen. See you next time. Peace.